It's a sad day in America, or is it? Last evening, President Donald J. Trump was impeached, even though many people say the evidence presented didn't prove any of the Democrats' allegations. We will discuss the prophetic implications of this event on today's edition of End of the Age. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to End of the Age. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries. Thank you for joining me today. Now, before we get off into this, the impeachment and how it ties into prophecy and all that, I want you to remember one statement that Donald Trump made. He said, "America will never be a socialistic nation." Remember that as we go down through here, because many of the people, whether they're not going to come right out and tell you they're socialists, but many of the people that are trying to impeach him are ran by a socialistic establishment. You've always got to remember that when you look at these things. Not really interested in the truth, not really interested in justice. They've got an agenda behind them. There are very influential people in the United States pushing the socialistic agenda, pushing a world governing agenda. So this is what we're going to get off into today. Now, most of you know by now that President Trump was impeached last evening. And now it's supposed to go to the Senate for really an all but certain Senate acquittal. Of course, Nancy Pelosi is holding some of the information and different things that are supposed to go to the Senate. And, I don't know how all that's going to play out. I'm not going to get political here today, this, that, and the other. But the fact of the matter is, I want to talk about the agenda behind it all. So I have a question. And you got to think about this. Why did all of this happen? I think it ties into Bible prophecy. I'm going to give you my opinion on the program today, and then you can sort it all out as you're mulling it over when I get done. But I think it ties right into Bible prophecy, and you'll see that before we finish up here today. Now, think about this as I go through the next 3 or 4 minutes of programming. According to the WhiteHouse.gov, President Trump administration has had many accomplishments. They have, since he was inaugurated as president back in 2017, January 2017, they've created almost 4 million jobs, and more Americans are now employed than are recorded ever before in our history. They've created more than 400,000 manufacturing jobs since his election. And manufacturing jobs are growing at the fastest rate in more than 3 decades. Economic growth last quarter hit 4.2. New unemployment claims recently hit a 49-year low. Median household incomes has hit the highest level ever recorded. African American unemployment has achieved the lowest rate ever recorded. Hispanic American unemployment is at the lowest rate ever recorded. Asian American unemployment recently achieved the lowest rate ever recorded. Women's unemployment recently reached the lowest rate in 65 years. Youth unemployment has recently hit the lowest rate in nearly half a century. The lowest unemployment rate ever recorded, Americans without a high school diploma. Under the Trump administration, veterans unemployment recently reached its lowest rate in nearly 20 years. Almost 3.9 million Americans have been off food stamps since the election. The pledge to America's workers has resulted in employers committing to train more than 4 million Americans. And the Trump administration is committed to vocational education, which is really lacking right now. 95% of the U.S. manufacturers are optimistic about the future, the highest ever. Retail sales have surged last month, up to 6% over last year. The Trump administration has signed the biggest package of tax cuts and reforms in history. And after the tax cuts, over $300 billion poured back into the United States in the first quarter alone. As a result of the tax bill, small businesses will have the lowest top marginal tax rate in more than 80 years. The Trump administration has opened ANWR and approved the Keystone XL and Dakota Access pipelines. There's a record number of regulations have been eliminated. They've enacted regulatory relief for community and credit unions. The Obama individual mandate penalty is gone. They provided more affordable health care for Americans through association health plans and short-term duration plans. They've secured $6 billion in new funding to fight the opioid epidemic. And they've reduced high-dose opioid prescriptions by 16% during the first year in office. They've also supporting our veterans. They signed the VA Choice Act and the VA Act, expanded VA healthcare services, walk-in clinics, and same-day urgent primary and mental health care. There's more to come, but the Trump administration has accomplished a whole lot for America.
About our trip, it was a wonderful experience. We totally enjoyed the time spent with other believers, worshiping and experiencing the places where Christ walked. One of our favorites was being on Mount Moriah, where the Holy of Holies are, the Dome of the Spirit. And the teachings that Brother Baxter did was so enlightening. It was so much to take in. It will take us another month or two to really grasp the full extent of the knowledge we received on this trip. Our tour guide in Israel was fantastic. He was very knowledgeable. I think God chose him just for us. Thanks, Jana. Our lives will never be the same. We will try to do this tour again. Mike and Julie L., Cayman Islands.
Join us May 1st through May 16th, 2020, for a trip to the wonderful land of Israel and the Holy Roman Empire reborn.
We've seen Bible prophecy fulfilled like never before. From the halls of the United Nations to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Endtime Ministries continues to reveal the Bible prophecy in the news headlines around the world every day. Whether it's through our broadcast or online at our Jerusalem Prophecy College, your gifts enable us to put vital materials in the hands of those who need it most. Because of you, we continue to replace fear with faith in the hearts of Christians around the world. We will continue to see prophecy come to pass at an even swifter pace. We need your support. Your donation of any amount enables us to continue to broadcast and be a voice in the ever-growing censored media. To become a partner or give a one-time gift, visit endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME right now. That's 800-363-8463. Go online now. Visit endtime.com.
You know, I wanted to go through a lot of these accomplishments of the Trump administration because I've got a question to ask you. Why? Why would you impeach a guy who has done so much for America? Now, let me go through a few more of these and then I'll answer that question for you. The Trump administration, I've got a few more. The Trump administration has increased our coal exports by 60%. The U.S. oil production recently reached an all-time high. The United States is a net neutral gas exporter, the first time since 1957. We withdrew the United States from the job-killing Paris Climate Accord. What a travesty that is. World government at its best. They canceled the illegal anti-coal so-called Clean Power Plan. They secured a record $700 billion in military, $716 billion next year. And our NATO allies are spending $69 billion more on defense since 2016. They weren't paying their fair share under the Obama administration. They withdrew from the horrible one-sided Iran deal, which was funneling money to Iran, which was then supporting terrorist factions around the world. They moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. They reached a breakthrough agreement with the EU to increase U.S. exports, impose tariffs on foreign steel, and to protect our national security. And the Trump administration has begun building the wall, which the international community cannot stand that because it goes against their efforts of globalism, which I will get to in a minute. And they said that Republicans want strong borders and no crime. Democrats want open borders, which equals massive crime. Of course, we saw that in the recent election with Hillary Clinton, who did not want a wall, and Donald Trump was for the wall. And then I might add on my own that the Trump administration has recognized Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel. Why have we not done that before? And of course, Donald Trump bashes the idea of socialism every chance he gets. Now, let me pause right there. You understand that many of the Democrats have adopted. Okay, the thing is, let's forget the Democrat-Republican thing for just a second. I don't want socialism from a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, or anything else here in America. So I'm not just saying, hey, you're a Democrat, I don't like you. You're a Republican, I like you. That's not what I'm saying here at all. I'm saying we're talking about human beings in America. We don't want socialism here. It would bankrupt this nation, and we would go off into a system of absolute control. That's what it would lead to. It always has, always will. So we have an individual in the White House, the President of the United States, who is against socialism, and he bashes it every chance he gets. He bashes it at the United Nations. He bashes it at the State of the Union speech. He says, we will not be a socialistic nation ever. I want somebody like that in the White House. And so, but there are people in the United States that fully advocate socialism. They would love to turn the United States into a socialistic nation. And so you got to see the agenda that's going on here when you look at this impeachment scenario that's going on. You see, the fact of the matter is that Pelosi, all these other people, they are puppets. They're not the ones really running the show. Sure, she's the speaker and this, that, and the other, and you've got Nadler and you've got Schiff and all these people, but they're puppets, everybody. They are not the ones running the show. There are people running the show that you've never heard their name before. It's called the establishment. I'm going to get into the establishment and this efforts towards a world government here in a minute, but we really need to understand what's going on here. And you know, the Trump administration, he's removing the United States step by step from the tentacles of this world government. The Paris Climate Agreement, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, all these different things. The list goes on and on and on. And the fact of the matter is, early on in his campaign, Donald Trump started talking against the process of globalism and globalization. And when these people who heard that, they thought, well, we can't let this guy get in office. That's why we were kind of shocked when he got in, honestly. But when he got elected, he starts talking against socialism and against globalization and things like that. Well, the establishment started pulling their hair out because they realized we got to get rid of this guy. So almost immediately they start talking about impeach, impeach, impeach. We can never let this guy, because they realized that, hey, this guy could actually do a lot of good for America and win another election. So we've got to impeach the guy. So there's a lot more behind this than what went on in Ukraine. The Ukraine is just smoke that's blown in front of everybody's eyes. Because there was no evidence that they could produce to impeach Trump. So they didn't really care about the facts. They didn't care about the truth. They just ramrodded it through because they had their bosses in their ear telling them, we got to get rid of this guy. And I'll get to all this in just a moment. I'm going to prove it to you. Now, you know, after all that and much more, what the Trump administration has accomplished for America, which is what we want, why would you be so determined to impeach the guy? I mean, now I must say, of course, if Donald Trump had done something impeachable with undeniable evidence, that would be one thing. I would want him impeached had he done something wrong with undeniable evidence. But that's not the case here. So the question is, why? Well, it's my opinion that President Trump, it's because he's not a globalist. Now, go with me here down this path, because look at all the good things he's done. Has he done anything, said something he shouldn't have? Sure. I mean, come on. Every president has. I've said things I wish I could take back. But that's not a reason to impeach a guy or remove a guy from office, the highest office in the land. He's done a lot of good. Why would you be so intent on impeach? Because there is an agenda being pushed that's so much bigger than this little impeachment ball of smoke that we've had blown in front of the American public's eyes. Donald Trump believes in America. There are people that have been against the establishment of this project called America for decades now. And Donald Trump he believes in America, and he's pushing the America First doctrine every chance he gets. You've heard him give speeches overseas, and he says, hey, I'm representing the American people. The international community does not want to hear that. The international community is not for the people. They're for them being in control of the people. Donald Trump is seen as a threat to the New World Order, and by the international community and by the establishment here in America and the rest of the globalists around the world, which make up the international community. There is an establishment here in America that wants to put America, to yield up our sovereignty and to put us into a one world governing body. And they see Donald Trump needs to be removed at all cost. They didn't want him in office to begin with. Once he got elected, though, then they said, we've got to impeach him. We definitely don't want him going into another election campaign. And that's why I wanted to read all the accomplishments that he has done since he was put in office. And look at what he could do with another 4 years. But yet, people that are against the United States, globalists, socialists, they don't want him in here because they're trying to. The United States has been the leader of this one world governing body for years. And now Donald Trump came along and he's pulling us out. So this is where the prophecy part of it comes in, because we're talking about the establishment of a world government prophesied 2,000 years ago that would be in power and established just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. That world government is being established as we speak. But then and it's going to be a socialistic one world government. The United Nations is a socialistic entity to the eyeballs. And back on September 25th, 2018, when President Trump was speaking at speaking to the world at the annual UN General Assembly, he said, this is why America will always choose independence and cooperation over global governance, control, and domination. Well, he's standing in the seat of world government at that point, the United Nations. He said, America is governed by Americans. We reject the ideology of globalism, and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism. The international community howled when he said that. because they knew we must get rid of this individual. He's the president of the most powerful nation on the planet, and he doesn't want to play ball with our world government. Up until then, every president of the United States for the last 70 plus years was on board with the world government. Think about it. Everyone. You say, well, you know, so-and-so, they were more conservative. Yeah, there have been conservatives and liberals, but at the end of their tenure, we were still involved with the United Nations, on board, moving right along. They never started pulling us out like the Trump administration did. Well, when Trump came along, they saw what he was going to do. They said, we've got to get rid of him immediately. But we, the American people, have had this smoke blown in our face that is Ukraine. And said, hey, there's this fog that you can't really see through. I can't put my fingers on it, but we're going to impeach the president because of this. And so you've seen people, thankfully, there have been people up there that have been fighting against this that have said, hey, give us the facts. Where's the facts? Where's the truth about all of this? Well, they couldn't produce that. And that's why these guys are sitting in there just astonished, like, I can't believe this is actually happening. And that's why Mitch McConnell has said, look, we're ready to acquit the guy when it comes to a Senate trial. And now Nancy Pelosi's withholding information that they need to go ahead with the trial because she knows what's going to happen. And what will happen is it'll turn around that it'll be a big spin on Mitch McConnell and the rest of the Republicans, because what will happen, and I say Republicans because they're the ones that have taken that name and they're the ones that are working against this, okay? Forget Democrat, Republican, and all this. I'm concerned about this world government. But at the end of the day, they'll say, well, we did our part. We impeached him, but you didn't do your part to go on, and that's how it'll be sold to the American people. It's already happening. I've seen it. But what's behind all of this? Well, it's this world government that's being established, the process of globalism. That's where this all leads back to. The number one issue, by far, in America's 2016 presidential campaign was globalism. And that one issue determined the future course of the United States of America. It all hinged on that. It was, abortion was important. Same-sex marriage was important. All these other things were very, very important. But at the end of the day, were we going to be sucked up into this world governing body, or were we going to remain independent? We signed a declaration of independence, not a declaration of interdependence with a world governing body. That's where it all hinged on. When they were talking about, we will build a wall or we won't build a wall. We're going to do away with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I mean, Donald Trump was a nationalist. He was a patriot. I'm just being honest here, Hillary Clinton was a progressive. She was socialist. She was willing to yield up more of our sovereignty than Obama did to the world governing body. Again, take politics out of it. It's what are these people trying to do? What's the agenda behind all of it? So, you say, well, what is globalism? Globalism is simply the belief that the nation states are obsolete and that the world must move into a system of world government, global governance. And, clearly stated, globalists believe national borders should be dissolved and a one world government should be instituted. Strobe Talbot, we talk about him all the time, but this is so important. Strobe Talbot stated it most clearly when he wrote an article, The Birth of a Global Nation, back in Time magazine, July 20, 1992. He said, within the next 100 years, nationhood, as we know it, it's going to be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority. He was advocating the world government that's being established right now. He was an advocate of that. Why is that so important? Because 2 years later, after writing this article, Strobe Talbot was tapped by President Clinton to serve as Deputy Secretary of State. We've got a full-on globalist as our Deputy Secretary of State under Bill Clinton. And he pushed his global agenda until the end of the Clinton presidency in 2001. Now, Bill Clinton's wife, Hillary Clinton, was running against Trump in 2016. She's a full-on globalist, everybody. She was a progressive, socialist, same thing. And so, why are we talking about this? Because the Bible prophesies a world government. See, there's a lot. If you got to step back and look at the big picture here, just don't look at Pelosi, Schiff, and all those guys. They're puppets. You got to look behind the scenes at people who are very powerful here in the United States, pushing for the United States to be involved in a world government. That's what you got to look at. The Bible prophesies this world government. The two most famous prophecy books in the Bible, Daniel and Revelation, prophesy a world government for the very near future. Daniel 7:23 says, "Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, shall tread it down and break it in pieces." This passage refers to the last day dictator, the Antichrist, who will rule the world just before the second coming of Jesus to the earth. Daniel 7:24 through 27 clearly tells us that this world government will continue until the return of Jesus, when the kingdom of God will be established on the earth. Revelation 13:7 says that the Antichrist in his one says about the Antichrist in his one world government, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints. This is during the Great Tribulation, and to overcome them, and power was given to him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. It's going to be a world government, everybody. Revelation 13:5 says how long the world government's going to continue. It said that there was given to him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given to him to continue 42 months. These 42 months refer to the time of the Great Tribulation, culminating with the second coming of Jesus Christ to the earth. Now you're kind of getting the picture of what's really going on here. We're talking about the establishment of a world governing body. When we're going to get back, we'll talk about maybe a few people who are involved in it.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. Endtime has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that Endtime magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctor's offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
So I want you to think about the scenario like this. Imagine that you and some very influential friends of yours are trying to establish a one world governing body. And when I say influential, I mean some of the most influential people on the planet. You're trying to establish a world government. You've been trying for well over a century now. When somebody comes along that doesn't want to play ball with that, what do? You got to get rid of them. And this is what's happening with Donald Trump right now. He's not wanting to play ball with the world government, and they've got to get rid of him. They don't care that what he thinks about our veterans, or they don't care about the health care plans, blah, blah, blah. They don't care about any of that stuff unless it goes along with the world governing body. The fact of the matter is that they're concerned about control over a one world government. So let me show you what I mean, because I'm going to go through some of the players who are involved in this and what they're trying to accomplish. And then I want you to look at that scenario compared to what's going on with Donald Trump and him being a America First president rather than a globalist who's interested in world government. So who's promoting the emerging world government? That's what we got to ask. Who are the drivers behind all of this? They're not people that you hear in the news. They don't star in movies and this, that, and the other. They're not on the nightly news. Some of them you may never have even heard of their name. But we're going to talk about it today because it's very important. This is what Donald Trump is fighting every single day. The drive towards a one world government, it did not begin yesterday, okay? It's been in progress for, over a century now at least. And I want to read you the following actions or quotes that I'm going to read you are many of our prominent world leaders promoting globalism. Most of these are from the United States, you understand. There are very powerful bankers and even presidents and people, the leaders of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Brookings Institute. Their goal is to establish a world governing body and to have the United States involved in that. Donald Trump is against that, so we got to get rid of him. I mean, think about it. Woodrow Wilson. After Woodrow Wilson, after World War I, President Woodrow Wilson conceived a system of global governance called the League of Nations. However, the members of the United States Congress understood that would mean the surrender of the U.S. sovereignty, and therefore they refused to ratify the organization because the League of Nations, they consigned the League of Nations to the dustbin of history. So Woodrow Wilson, very much involved. Now, this is way back. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1935. And like I said, this hasn't been established just yesterday. They're really at the culmination of this thing. Then a leader gets elected into the White House that they can't control, and they can't stand it, everybody. They howl every day about it. And they've got to get rid of him. 1935, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, he ordered the term Novus Ordo Seclorum placed on the back of the dollar bill at the bottom of the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. Novus is Latin for new. Ordo is Latin for order. Seclorum is Latin for secular or world. So way back in 1935, President Roosevelt was thinking about a new world order. At the conclusion of World War II, Roosevelt became the driving force behind the formation of the United Nations. I mean, the UN was from the outset designed ultimately to be a structure for world government. James Warburg, many of you have heard of him, the son of Paul Warburg. I'm not going to go through all the history. We don't have time for that in 6 programs. But if you look at James Warburg, some of you may have heard of that. He was the author of the Federal Reserve Act, which controls our lives right now. The Federal Reserve controls our money, the interest rates, okay? So he said, we shall have a world government, whether or not you like it, by conquest or consent. This was a statement by Council on Foreign Relations member James Warburg. Remember the Council on Foreign Relations. Keep that in the back of your mind, because that was designed to help bring us into a one world governing body. And he said that to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on February 7th, 1950. Here we are in almost 2020. These guys have been talking about this forever. And you wonder what's happening to Trump? It's really pretty easy to see. And then the Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter, 1952. The real rulers in Washington are invisible and exercise power from behind the scenes. People in those that run in those circles, they know what's going on. Then Senator William Fulbright. The case for government by elites is irrefutable. He said that. He's a former chairman of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He said in 1963 in a symposium entitled The Symposium, The Elite and the Electorate, Is Government by the People Possible? Well, some of you would recognize the name Barry Goldwater. In his book, With No Apologies, former Republican presidential nominee Barry Goldwater said, the Trilateral Commission is intended to be the vehicle for multinational consolidation of the commercial and the banking interest by seizing control of the political government of the United States. The Trilateral Commission represents a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centers of power: political, monetary, intellectual, and ecclesiastical. And what the Trilateral Commission intends is to create a worldwide economic power superior to the political governments of the nation states involved. As managers and creators of the system, they will rule the future. Now, I got a note to everybody that the Trilateral Commission was founded by David Rockefeller, a known globalist. Why? Because they had the goal was to create a world governing body with the United States fully involved in that. And these guys are saying they're running Washington. Until you have a guy come along that gets elected to the President of the United States that doesn't want to play ball with them. So what do you do with that? You try to demonize him, you demonize his family. You make him out to be a buffoon if you can. The problem is, like I read in the beginning, he's had so many accomplishments in the last 3 years as president that it's hard to deny that he's really working for the American people and going against what the establishment has been doing for years, and that is yielding up our sovereignty and redistributing our wealth around the world. So they can't stand Donald Trump. So the Ukraine thing, again, that was just smoke, everybody. Think about it. Richard Gardner, some of you may know, have heard that name. He said the New World Order will have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down. But in the end run, around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, that we will accomplish more than the old-fashioned frontal assault. This is all being done secretly up until now. It's kind of, if you can research it, it's pretty easy to see most of it. But for years and years and years, it was all hush-hush. You remember the Creature from Jekyll Isle, when they went out, all these bankers on the Jekyll Isle and created a lot of these things. So they created the Federal Reserve, actually. So this was that Richard Gardner was a Council on Foreign Relations member, and he wrote this in April 1974 in the issue of the CFR's journal, Foreign Affairs. Irvin Baxter and I both get Foreign Affairs today because I want to know what's going on. And then you had the Cold War. It was a pause. After World War II, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union immediately began. Consequently, not much progress was made towards global government for the next 40 years. But that didn't mean it ended. With the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was a march toward world government. It resumed again. The fall of the Berlin Wall, November 9th, 1989, signaled the end of the Cold War. Mikhail Gorbachev, George H.W. Bush, and Pope John Paul II met together 20 days later. And they came out of those meetings announcing the birth of what? What Franklin Delano Roosevelt put on our dollar bill. The New World Order. George H.W. Bush. You say, well, hold on a second. He's a good old Texas boy down here. He would never be involved in this. Oh, no. Shortly after the meeting with Gorbachev and the Pope, Bush Sr. said, we have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders. So you see, everybody, this didn't start yesterday. We're at the culmination of it. These guys they're ready to pull the trigger on the whole thing. Now, we know that it's still being established. The Antichrist won't take control until halfway through the final 7 years. That's why we watch the signing of this peace agreement like a hawk, because when the peace agreement is signed that has the 5 characteristics of the biblical peace agreement, that starts the final 7 years. Halfway into that, the Antichrist will usurp authority over this world governing body, and that's when the Great Tribulation starts. So we watch all this stuff really, really closely. Then we come to Bill Clinton, his speech at the UN in September of 22nd, 1997. He said, the forces of global integration are a great tide, inexorably wearing away the established order of things. The United Nations must play a leading role in this effort, filling in the fault lines of the new global era. Before the century ends, we should establish a permanent international criminal court to prosecute the most serious violations of humanitarian law. Well, this world court is to place individuals on trial without the protection of the United States Constitution or the Bill of Rights. And that was adopted by the world community on July 17th, 98, everybody. And it was then ratified and came into force in 2002. So you can see we're way off into this thing. And what are we talking about today? We're talking about a president that has been elected that is not wanting to play ball with them. He says these are all these guys are socialist. They want to implement socialism here in the United States. That's why when we get on here and we talk about a socialistic one world governing body, we don't want a part of that. That's what the Antichrist kingdom is going to be. It's going to be socialistic. It's all about control, control, control. Socialism, communism, all these different things, all these isms, they lead to control. And so it's very important that we talk about these things. When I get back, I'm going to go through a few more members that you may have heard of and may not have heard of that have advocated a world government over the years to let you know what's going on right now.
Does the book of Revelation frighten you? Do its symbols confuse you? For centuries, the book of Revelation has been misunderstood and misinterpreted. In Revelation, the unveiling of Jesus Christ, Volume 1, Irvin Baxter unlocks the mystery of the book of Revelation with in-depth analysis and commentary like you've never heard before. This 10-part definitive DVD series and 268-page comprehensive commentary book covers the first 12 chapters of the book of Revelation, featuring on-location photography, classic artwork, and symbolic illustrations. You'll walk away with complete understanding and peace about the events happening during the final years on Earth. These comprehensive study tools, available for $299, will deepen your biblical understanding as you dig into the original intent of the book, answering the mysterious prophecies and symbols of the book of Revelation. Don't miss this special offer. Call now, 1-800-ENDTIME, or go to endtime.com to order. Call or go online now to get this comprehensive Bible study.
So let's go to another one real quick. Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America. We've talked about him recently. He said, it seems to many of us that if we are to avoid the eventual catastrophic world conflict, we must strengthen the United Nations as a first step towards a world government patterned after our own government, with a legislature, executive branch, judiciary, and a police to enforce its international laws, keep the peace, To do that, of course, we Americans will have to yield up some of our sovereignty. And that would be a bitter pill. It would take a lot of courage, a lot of faith in the New World Order. And today we must develop federal structures on a global level. We need a system of enforceable world law, a democratic federal world government to deal with world problems. Now, this came from, this quote was taken from Cronkite's speech as he accepted the 1999 Norman Cousins Global Governance Award, given annually by the World Federalist Association to the person doing the most to promote world government. You never knew Walter Cronkite was a globalist, did you? There are very influential people in the United States pushing for a world government. Donald Trump, you talk about the swamp, the establishment, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, Brookings Institute. They are all part of this, everybody. David Rockefeller, of course. Most of you probably have heard of him, the chairman of the board of Chase Bank. So even, he said, some even believe we, the Rockefeller family, are part of a secret cabal working against the best interest of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalist and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. This comes from the memoirs by David Rockefeller on page 405, published back in 2002. He openly admitted, of course I'm trying to establish a world government. He also said, we are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during these years. But the work is now much more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supernatural sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries. David Rockefeller was the founder of the Trilateral Commission, and this was in an address to a meeting of the Trilateral Commission in June of 1991. Then, of course, you had England's Prime Minister, Tony Blair. He said, we're all internationalists now, whether we like it or not. He said, on the eve of the new millennium, we are now in a new world. We need new rules for international cooperation and new ways of organizing our international institutions. Today, the impulse towards independence is immeasurably greater. We are witnessing the beginnings of a new doctrine of international community. Then you have Henry Kissinger. He was asked by a reporter at the beginning of President Obama's first term, back in 2009, what he thought the most important thing was that Barack Obama could accomplish. And former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger said, I think his task will be to develop an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created. It's a great opportunity. It isn't just a crisis. And of course, Kissinger was a lifelong protege of David Rockefeller. Gideon Rockman, he was a chief foreign affairs commentator for the Financial Times. In his column, Rockman said, I have never believed that there is a secret United Nations plot to take over the U.S., but for the first time in my life, I think the formation of some sort of a world government is plausible. A world government would involve much more than cooperation between nations. It would be an entity with state-like characteristics backed by a body of laws. The European Union has already set up a continental government of 27 countries, which could be a model. The EU as a Supreme Court, a currency, thousands of pages of law, a large civil service, and the ability to deploy military force. So, could the European model go global? He said there are 3 reasons for thinking that it might. And then he goes on to explain the reasons why he believes world government is plausible. And then, of course, former congressmen. Coming to the end of these, but I just wanted you to get a well-rounded view that this stuff didn't start yesterday. Former Congressman John Rarick in 1971 said the Council on Foreign Relations is the establishment. Did you hear that? You wonder who's really running this stuff behind the scenes? He said not only does it have the influence and power in key decision-making positions at the highest levels of government to apply pressure from above, but it also announces and uses individuals and groups to bring pressure from below to justify the high-level decisions from converting the U.S. from a sovereign constitutional republic, here it is, into a servile member state of a one-world dictatorship. Now, this is what's really going on here in America. And the above quotes promoting a world government, they're simply a small sample, everybody, of leaders that have come to believe the answer to global peace and security is a one-world government. I mean, the idea has been promoted in colleges, the press, business circles, throughout religious institutions until it has gained virtual control over both the Republican and Democratic parties. Now, again, not everybody in the Republican Party and not everybody in the Democratic Party. But when you think about the controllers, and that's the reason, really, no matter which party has been in power over the last 50 years. Think about this. The country, whether the president has been Republican or Democrat, the country seems to just keep moving in the same direction, the direction of global governance. Whether it's a good old boy from Texas or it's somebody from New York or California, wherever, didn't matter. And those who have been leading the United States steadily towards a world government, they have become known as, you will recognize this term because Trump has talked about them. Those in the United States that have steadily led us towards world government, they've become known as the establishment, whether Democrat or Republican. You say, well, the establishment, what do they believe? What's the establishment believe? Well, the globalists believe that the nation state has outlived its usefulness. National sovereignty has become the problem, and a system of world government is the solution. The reasoning goes like this. History shows that sovereign nations inevitably, sooner or later, come into conflict. When those conflicts can't be worked out through diplomacy, nations go to war. Weapons of mass destruction have become so powerful that mankind now has the ability to destroy himself many times over. And therefore, war must be eliminated, even outlawed. The only way to do that is to eliminate nations, disband national armies, and place all arms under a global authority, making war impossible. Sounds awesome, doesn't it? When a dispute arises among states, they can take their issues before the United Nations, presenting their cases before the UN Security Council. All nations would then agree to abide by the decisions of the global authority, thus eliminating war forever. Remember, there's a world government prophesied in the Bible 2,000 years ago. We're there. We're way off into it, everybody. And since all national armies will have been disbanded and the only army left will be under the control of the global authority, all nations will have no choice but to submit their decisions to the world government, right? I mean, that's what you and I want to do, right? I mean, that sounds awesome. That's why we signed a Declaration of Independence. We didn't sign a Declaration of Interdependence. There are a lot of people that would like to say that. That's not what we did. But one uncomfortable question remains. All these plans seem pretty good until we ask one uncomfortable question. What would happen if, let's say, Adolf Hitler gained control over the only army that's left? The world's checks and balances, they've been destroyed. And the world will be subjected to the worst tyranny history has ever known. Promoters of globalization or globalism, They argue that such a scenario will never happen, but the Bible clearly prophesies that's exactly what's going to happen. And as soon as the planned world government becomes strong enough to dominate the world, that's exactly what's going to happen. The problem is that leader won't be Adolf Hitler. It's going to be someone much worse. And the Bible calls him the beast or the Antichrist. And the only thing standing between mankind and the emergence of this planned world order is the United States of America and the Americans' people love of their national sovereignty. Okay? Now, that's where Donald Trump comes in. Love him or hate him. He's been, and forget Democrats, Republicans, independents, forget all that. I'm concerned about this prophesied world governing body that the Antichrist will usurp authority over, and will the United States be involved in that? There are very influential institutions. The establishment wants to push us off into a one world governing body. I just used maybe 15 or 20 quotes here, folks. There are thousands of people involved in this. And they work day and night to yield up our sovereignty to this one world governing body. That's what they were designed to do. It's called the establishment here in America. Now, when you have a guy who was a real estate developer get elected president, he run a big, huge, several billion-dollar business, gets elected to the presidency of the United States, and says, we will never be a socialistic nation. We're going to build a wall on our southern border and protect the United States. And we will never yield to a world governing body. We are going to be ran by the people of the United States. I actually heard one speech where he said, I was elected to give the power back to the people where it belongs. These people that are part of the establishment, they can't stand that. So what are they doing? They've got to get rid of him at all cost. Well, if they need to fabricate something, let's fabricate it. Who cares? And so now you've watched the process, many of you, if you've watched any of this impeachment process, that when they would ask somebody, do you have facts about this case? They would say, no. I mean, it's a horrible travesty what's been going on. So that, I wanted to give you that today because it ties right in my mind, with the prophecies of the Bible. They're trying to establish a world government. The establishment here in the United States wants that to happen. But you've got a guy who's president who says, we're not going to do that. So what do you have to do? You got to get rid of him. Hence the impeachment process going on now.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.